On the morning of her wedding, when the world believed she was about to live her happiest day, a man who had driven her for 10 years leaned close and whispered, "Madam, if you value your life, hide in the boot. Right now." She laughed at first. Brides are nervous. Drivers exaggerate. But then she saw his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, but from truth. Because what he knew, what no one else dared to say, would shatter everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the man waiting for her at the altar. And by sunset, this wedding would be remembered not for vows, but for a disappearance no one could explain. Stay till the end, because the truth behind that whisper changed every life connected to it. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Who was this driver, and why would he risk everything to warn her? What kind of truth hides behind silk gowns and smiling guests? Was he trying to save her, or destroy her happiness? And most haunting of all, why did the bride vanish just minutes before she was meant to say, "I do"? This is not just a wedding story. It is a story about power, silence, and the price of knowing the truth. It's about the warnings we ignore and the voices we dismiss. It's about the difference between what we see and what is real. And most importantly, it's about survival when the person you trust most becomes the greatest threat to your life. Her name was Evelyn Carter. To the world, she was elegance itself. Mid-50s. Calm voice. Grace in every step. She wasn't born rich. She came from a small town in Ohio where her father worked at a factory and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Evelyn learned early that beauty could open doors, but intelligence kept them open. She studied hard, got scholarships, and worked her way through college while her classmates partied. She graduated with honors in business administration and moved to New York City with $200 in her pocket and a suitcase held together with duct tape. The city was brutal. She worked 3 jobs, lived in a basement apartment with 4 other girls, and ate ramen noodles for months. But Evelyn had something most people didn't have: patience and vision. She could see 5 years ahead when others barely saw tomorrow. She worked her way up in a marketing firm, became indispensable, and by her early 30s, she was running her own consulting business. That's when she met David Carter. David was different from the men who usually pursued her. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drive expensive cars or wear designer suits. He was an architect who loved old buildings and talked about preserving history rather than tearing it down. He made her laugh. He listened when she spoke. And when he proposed, he did it in the most ordinary way possible, during breakfast on a rainy Sunday morning, with no ring, just a promise that he would love her exactly as she was. They married quietly. No big wedding. Just 2 people who chose each other. For 15 years, they built a life together. David's architecture firm grew. Evelyn's consulting business expanded. They bought a beautiful home in Connecticut. They talked about children, but it never happened, and somehow, it didn't matter because they had each other. They traveled. They laughed. They fought and made up. They were real. And then one morning, everything changed. David collapsed at a construction site. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Massive heart attack. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. Evelyn's world ended that day. She stopped working. Stopped eating. Stopped caring about anything. Friends came and went, offering condolences that felt empty. Family members she barely knew suddenly appeared, asking questions about David's estate. Because what no one told her until after the funeral was that David had been far wealthier than she realized. He had investments she didn't know about. Properties in 3 states. A life insurance policy worth millions. And he had left everything to her. The lawyers called it a blessing. Evelyn called it a curse. Because she would have traded every dollar to have him back. The money felt dirty. Wrong. Like she was being paid for his death. She tried to give it away at first. Donated to charities. Funded scholarships. Built a community center in David's name. But there was too much. And the more she gave, the more people came asking for more. Distant relatives emerged from nowhere. Old friends from college suddenly remembered her. Men she had never met before started appearing at charity events, introducing themselves, expressing sympathy, and casually mentioning they were single. It was exhausting. So Evelyn retreated. She left the big house in Connecticut and moved to a quieter estate in upstate New York. She hired staff to handle the properties and investments. She stopped going to social events. And she hired a driver. Samuel. He came recommended by her lawyer. Late 60s. Former military. Calm. Professional. Didn't talk unless spoken to. That's what she needed. Someone who wouldn't ask questions or offer opinions or try to fix her grief with platitudes. For the first year, Samuel drove her in silence. To lawyer meetings. To the cemetery every Sunday. To the occasional dinner with her sister. He never asked why she cried. Never commented on the tissues she left crumpled in the back seat. Never treated her like she was fragile. He just drove. And somehow, that quiet presence became the most comforting part of her week. Years passed this way. Evelyn existed rather than lived. She managed her wealth efficiently but felt no joy from it. She attended the necessary meetings but made no real connections. She was going through motions, waiting for nothing in particular, just surviving day by day. Then, for years after David's death, she met Richard Hale. It happened at a charity gala she almost didn't attend. Her sister had convinced her to go, saying she couldn't hide forever. Evelyn agreed reluctantly, wore a simple black dress, and planned to leave early. Richard approached her at the bar. Not aggressively. Not with a pickup line. He simply said, "You look like someone who wishes they were anywhere but here." She smiled despite herself. That obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way, he replied. They talked. Just talked. About nothing important. About how these events all felt the same. About how many shrimp cocktails were too many. About how the speeches always ran too long. It was easy. Comfortable. When she left, he didn't ask for her number. He simply said, "I hope I see you again." And somehow, that restraint intrigued her. She did see him again. At another event 3 weeks later. Then at a museum opening. Then at a fundraiser for children's hospitals. Each time, he was polite. Friendly. Never pushy. He didn't ask about her late husband. Didn't ask about her money. Didn't try to impress her with his own accomplishments. He just talked to her like she was a person, not a wealthy widow. Gradually, Evelyn found herself looking forward to these chance meetings. She started accepting more invitations, hoping he might be there. And when he finally asked her to dinner, properly asked, she said yes without hesitation. Richard was everything she needed at that moment in her life. Stable. Mature. Understanding. He was 58, had been married once before, amicably divorced, no children. He ran a successful investment firm, lived comfortably but not extravagantly, and seemed genuinely content with his life. He didn't need her money. He had his own. He didn't need her connections. He had his own. He just seemed to enjoy her company. They dated slowly. Dinner once a week. A museum on Sundays. A weekend trip to Vermont. He never rushed her. Never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. And when he met her sister, her friends, even Samuel, he was consistently kind and respectful. Everyone approved. He's good for you, her sister said. "You're smiling again." And she was. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt like maybe she could have a second chance at happiness. Maybe David's death didn't mean her life had to end too. Maybe she could love again. When Richard proposed, 18 months after they first met, he did it simply. No grand gesture. Just the two of them at dinner, and a quiet question, "Would you consider spending the rest of your life with me?" She said yes. And meant it. But Samuel noticed things. He always had. It was part of his training from his military days. Read people. Watch patterns. Notice inconsistencies. And something about Richard Hale didn't sit right. It wasn't anything obvious. Richard was always polite when Samuel drove them. Always thanked him. Always treated him with respect. But there were small things. The way Richard's smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he checked his phone constantly when he thought no one was watching. The way he asked very specific questions about Evelyn's estate, her properties, her investments, always casually, always wrapped in concern. "I just want to make sure you're being taken care of properly," he would say. Samuel noticed how Richard gradually encouraged Evelyn to consolidate her accounts. It would be simpler, he suggested. Easier to manage. He noticed how Richard recommended replacing her longtime lawyer with someone from his own firm. Fresh perspective, he called it. He noticed how Richard slowly isolated Evelyn from her oldest friends. Never obviously. Just small comments. "Did she really say that? That seems unkind. I'm not sure he has your best interests at heart. They might be jealous of your happiness." Evelyn didn't see it. She was in love. She trusted Richard. She believed he was helping her. But Samuel saw the pattern. He had seen it before, during his military service in places where trust was a weapon and betrayal was a strategy. Still, he said nothing. It wasn't his place. He was a driver. Staff. And Evelyn seemed genuinely happy. Who was he to question her judgment based on a feeling? But then came the phone call. The one Samuel wasn't supposed to hear. It was the night before the wedding. Samuel had driven Richard to the estate to drop off some final documents for the ceremony. Richard asked him to wait in the car. It was raining hard. Samuel sat in the driver's seat, engine running, heat on, listening to the rain hammer the roof. That's when he heard Richard's voice. The man was standing under the covered entrance, thinking he was alone, making a phone call. His voice carried in the quiet night. "Tomorrow changes everything," Richard said. Samuel's attention sharpened. Something in the tone was wrong. "Once she signs the papers, we're golden," Richard continued. "The estate transfers according to the prenup terms I negotiated. Power of attorney kicks in immediately if anything happens." Silence while the other person spoke. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Richard laughed. "She trusts me completely. She actually thinks I love her." Samuel's blood went cold. "The accident needs to look completely natural," Richard said, his voice dropping lower. "I'm thinking 3 months after the wedding. Maybe 4. Long enough that it doesn't look suspicious. We'll be on one of those drives she loves. Maybe up to Vermont. Winding roads. Bad weather. Tragic accident. Widow loses control. No witnesses." Another pause. "Yes, I already have someone in mind for that. Professional. Makes it look perfect." Samuel couldn't breathe. "And no, the driver won't be a problem. He's old. He follows orders. He doesn't ask questions. We'll use someone else for that particular trip." Richard laughed again, a sound that made Samuel's stomach turn. "By this time next year, I'll have everything. The estate. The properties. The investments. All of it." And all it cost me was 2 years of playing the devoted fiancé. Not a bad return on investment. He ended the call and walked back inside, whistling. Samuel sat in the car, shaking. Not from cold. From rage. From horror. From the terrible knowledge that he had just heard a murder plot. And the victim was the woman he had driven, protected, and quietly cared about for nearly 10 years. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at his small kitchen table in his apartment, trying to decide what to do. Call the police. And tell them what? That he overheard one side of a phone conversation about a murder that hadn't happened yet? They would dismiss it. They would call it paranoia or misunderstanding. Go to Evelyn. And destroy her happiness the night before her wedding based on a conversation she didn't hear. She would think he was jealous or crazy or trying to sabotage her marriage. She would fire him. And Richard would proceed with his plan unchecked. By dawn, Samuel had made his decision. He couldn't stop the wedding. He couldn't convince Evelyn with words. But he could save her life. Even if it meant she would hate him for it. Even if it meant losing his job. Even if it meant everyone would think he had lost his mind. He had to act. The morning of the wedding was perfect. Clear blue sky. Gentle breeze. Birds singing. The estate had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses everywhere. Silk ribbons streaming from trees. A string quartet tuning their instruments. Guests arriving in expensive cars, dressed in designer clothes, carrying elaborate gifts. Inside the house, Evelyn was surrounded by people. Her sister doing last-minute adjustments to her veil. The makeup artist adding final touches. The photographer capturing every moment. Her dress was stunning. Ivory silk with delicate lace. It had cost more than Samuel earned in 2 years, but Evelyn wore it with grace. She looked beautiful. Radiant. Happy. And completely unaware that the man waiting for her at the altar was planning her murder. Samuel arrived at exactly 9 in the morning, as instructed. His job was simple: drive Evelyn to the venue on the property where the ceremony would take place. A 10-minute drive. That's all. He wore his best suit. Polished his shoes. Cleaned the car until it gleamed. And prepared to commit what might be considered kidnapping. When Evelyn came out, her sister and bridesmaids fussing around her, Samuel's heart nearly broke. She looked so happy. So full of hope. So ready to start this new chapter. "Good morning, Samuel," she said warmly. "Doesn't everything look wonderful?" "Yes, madam," he replied, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Very beautiful." He opened the car door. She gathered her dress carefully and slid into the back seat. The bridesmaids would follow in another car. Her sister would ride with her brother-in-law. This moment, right now, was his only chance. Samuel closed her door. Walked around the car. Got into the driver's seat. Started the engine. And instead of heading toward the venue, he turned onto the service road that led away from the estate. Evelyn didn't notice at first. She was looking at her bouquet, adjusting her veil, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. But after a few minutes, she glanced up. "Samuel. This doesn't look like the right way." He met her eyes in the rearview mirror. This was it. The moment everything would change. "Madam," he said quietly. "I need you to trust me." Evelyn's smile faded. "Samuel, what's going on?" "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry. But I can't let you marry him." Her face went pale. "Excuse me." Samuel pulled the car over to the side of the road, under a grove of oak trees, out of sight from the main house. He turned around to face her fully. "Last night, I overheard Mr. Hale on the phone," Samuel began. "He was making arrangements. Not for the wedding. For after." Evelyn's hand went to her throat. What are you talking about? He's planning to kill you, madam, Samuel said, his voice breaking slightly. 3 or 4 months after the wedding. Make it look like an accident. Once you sign the marriage papers today, he gets access to everything through the legal arrangements he had you make. The prenup. The power of attorney. All of it. Evelyn stared at him like he had spoken in another language. Samuel, that's insane. Richard loves me. We're getting married. You must have misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand, Samuel said firmly. He said it clearly. He has someone already arranged to cause the accident. He said you trust him completely. He said by next year, he'll have everything, and all it cost him was 2 years playing the devoted fiancé. Tears were forming in Evelyn's eyes, but Samuel couldn't tell if they were from shock, anger, or disbelief. This is my wedding day, she whispered. How could you do this to me? Because I care about you living to see your next birthday more than I care about keeping my job, Samuel replied. I know how this sounds. I know you think I've lost my mind. But madam, in my 68 years on this earth, I have never been more certain of anything. That man is going to kill you. Evelyn's phone started ringing. She ignored it. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you tell me last night? Why wait until now? Would you have believed me? Samuel asked gently. Or would you have thought I was trying to ruin your happiness? She had no answer for that. Her phone rang again. Then again. Text messages started flooding in. Her sister. The wedding planner. Friends asking where she was. Richard's name appeared on her screen. I have a plan, Samuel said quickly. I know a place. A farmhouse upstate that belongs to my cousin. No one knows about it. You can hide there while I figure out how to prove what he's planning. We can contact the police, hire investigators, whatever it takes. But you cannot marry him today. You cannot sign those papers. Because the moment you do, your life is on a countdown. Evelyn was shaking now. Her perfect makeup was starting to run as tears fell. This is impossible. Richard is good. He's kind. He wouldn't hurt anyone. Then why are your hands shaking? Samuel asked. Why are you crying? Because somewhere inside, madam, you know I'm not lying. You know I have no reason to make this up. You know I've served you faithfully for 10 years. Why would I destroy this day unless I truly believed your life was in danger? If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Evelyn sat frozen in the back seat. Her mind was racing through possibilities, memories, tiny moments she had dismissed. The way Richard had insisted on that particular lawyer. The way he had suggested consolidating her accounts. The way he had gradually replaced her longtime financial advisor with someone from his firm. The way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, calculating rather than loving. The way he had been so insistent about the prenup terms, claiming it was just to protect both of them. I've spent my whole life reading people, Samuel continued. It's what kept me alive in the service. And from the first time I met him, something felt wrong. But you were happy. You were healing. So I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it wasn't my place. Until last night, when I heard him planning your death like he was scheduling a business meeting. Evelyn's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Dozens of calls. Texts filling her screen. The wedding was supposed to start in 10 minutes. 200 guests were waiting. Richard was at the altar. Her sister was probably panicking. The caterers had prepared food for a reception. The band was ready to play. And here she sat, in a car on the side of a road, wearing a wedding dress, being told that the man she loved wanted her dead. What if you're wrong, she whispered. What if you misunderstood? What if I make this choice and ruin everything and it turns out Richard was innocent? Then I'll spend the rest of my life apologizing, Samuel said. I'll accept whatever consequences come. But madam, what if I'm right? What if you walk down that aisle, and in 4 months, you're dead? What if your sister spends the rest of her life wondering why she didn't see the signs? What if I have to live knowing I could have saved you and didn't? Evelyn looked down at her hands. At the engagement ring that had seemed so beautiful yesterday. At the bouquet of white roses. At the dress that represented hope and new beginnings. They'll think I've lost my mind, she said. Running away on my wedding day. Leaving Richard at the altar. They'll think I'm cruel. Or crazy. Or both. They'll think what they think, Samuel replied. But you'll be alive to hear it. She looked up at him, this quiet man who had driven her through the worst years of her life. Who had never asked for anything. Who had been nothing but loyal and professional. Who now risked everything to protect her. If we do this, she said slowly, if we run, we need proof. We need to find out the truth. Because I can't hide forever, Samuel. And I can't live not knowing if the man I loved was real or just a very convincing performance. We'll find the truth, Samuel promised. Whatever it takes. Evelyn took a deep breath. She had built a life on trusting her instincts. On making hard decisions. On choosing survival over sentiment. She had lost one husband to fate. She wouldn't lose her own life to trust misplaced. Okay, she whispered. Where's this farmhouse? Samuel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. 3 hours north. Middle of nowhere. My cousin only uses it in summer. He's in Florida now. He won't mind. Evelyn looked at her phone one last time. Richard's name flashed on the screen. She turned the phone off. Then we should go, she said. Before I change my mind. Samuel drove carefully but quickly. Away from the estate. Away from the wedding. Away from the life Evelyn had been about to start. In the back seat, Evelyn sat in her wedding dress, watching the world pass by the window. Fields. Small towns. Gas stations. Normal life happening while hers fell apart. She thought about Richard. About the way he kissed her forehead when he thought she was sleeping. About the way he held her hand during movies. About the way he said her name. Had it all been acting? Was he really that good at pretending? Or was Samuel wrong? Was this all a terrible mistake? But then she remembered something. A conversation she had almost forgotten. It was 3 months ago. They were at dinner. Richard's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his whole face changed for just a second. Went hard. Cold. Then he smiled and declined the call. Who was that? She had asked casually. No one important, he said. Business thing. I'll handle it tomorrow. But she had seen the name on the screen before he declined. Just a first name, Marcus. She had thought nothing of it at the time. But now she wondered, who was Marcus? Why did that call make Richard's face change like that? There were other small moments too. The time she caught him in her home office, going through files. He said he was looking for a pen. The time he asked very specific questions about her late husband's insurance policies. He said he was just curious about how these things worked. The time her longtime accountant called her concerned about some account changes Richard had suggested. Richard said the accountant was old-fashioned and resistant to modern financial strategies. Individually, these moments meant nothing. But together, they formed a pattern. And that pattern made Samuel's warning seem less crazy. By the time they reached the farmhouse, Evelyn had gone through every memory of the past 2 years with Richard. Examining each moment. Questioning each gesture. Wondering what had been real and what had been calculated. The farmhouse was exactly as Samuel described. Small. Isolated. A dirt road leading to it through dense woods. No neighbors for miles. It had running water and electricity, but just barely. One bedroom. A tiny kitchen. A bathroom with ancient fixtures. Nothing like the luxury Evelyn was accustomed to. But it was safe. And right now, that mattered more than comfort. Samuel helped Evelyn out of the car. She gathered the long skirts of her wedding dress and walked into the farmhouse. It smelled like old wood and dust. There was furniture covered in sheets. Windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. A stone fireplace that probably hadn't been used in years. "I'm sorry it's not better," Samuel said. "It's fine," Evelyn replied, though her voice shook. She looked down at her wedding dress, so out of place in this rough country setting. "Do you think your cousin has any normal clothes here?" Samuel searched and found some old jeans and a sweater in a closet. They were too big for Evelyn, but they would work. She went into the bathroom and changed. When she came out, she was holding the wedding dress. "I should burn it," she said. "Not yet," Samuel replied. "We might need it. Evidence of the day. Proof of timeline. Something." She nodded and draped it over a chair. Without makeup, without the dress, she looked older. Tired. Vulnerable. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we think," Samuel said. "We need proof. We need to figure out how to expose Richard without putting you in danger." "My phone," Evelyn said suddenly. "They can track phones. If I turn it on, they'll know where I am." "Leave it off," Samuel agreed. "I brought some supplies. Food, water, blankets. I'll go into town tomorrow for more. But tonight, we stay here. Stay hidden. Let them wonder." Back at the estate, chaos erupted. The bride had vanished. The car was gone. Samuel was gone. Some guests thought it was a prank. Others feared kidnapping. Evelyn's sister was crying hysterically. Richard stood at the altar, looking shocked and confused and concerned. "We need to call the police," he said. "Something terrible must have happened. This isn't like her." The police were called. Reports were filed. Search parties were organized. Helicopters searched the surrounding area. News crews arrived. The story spread, "Wealthy bride vanishes on wedding day." Richard gave emotional interviews. "I just want her safe," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't care about the wedding. I just need to know she's okay." He offered a reward for information. $50,000 to anyone who could help find Evelyn. People who knew Evelyn spoke to reporters. "She was so happy," her sister sobbed. "She wanted this wedding. Something terrible must have happened." But hidden in that farmhouse, Evelyn watched the news on Samuel's old laptop, using public Wi-Fi from a nearby library that Samuel drove to. And she saw Richard's performance. The concerned fiancé. The devastated lover. The man desperate to find his missing bride. He was good. Very good. If she hadn't known what Samuel overheard, she would have believed every word. "He's very convincing," she said quietly. "Sociopaths usually are," Samuel replied. "They have to be. It's how they survive." Days passed in strange, slow motion. Samuel made trips into town for supplies, always to different towns, always paying cash, never using the same store twice. Evelyn stayed hidden. She cut her hair short with kitchen scissors. She wore Samuel's cousin's old clothes. She stopped looking like the elegant woman from the news. She looked like someone ordinary. Someone invisible. That was the point. The media coverage intensified. Theories spread. Some thought she had been kidnapped. Others speculated she got cold feet and ran. A few cruel commentators suggested she had staged the whole thing for attention. Richard continued his performance. He hired private investigators. He increased the reward to $100,000. He appeared on national news shows, pleading for Evelyn's safe return. "I love her," he said, tears in his eyes. "If she's watching this, please come home. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. I just want you safe." Evelyn's sister believed him completely. Her friends rallied around him. Even people who had been skeptical of the relationship now felt guilty for doubting him. He was playing the role perfectly. Meanwhile, Samuel was quietly investigating. He had contacts from his military days. People who knew how to find information. People who operated outside normal channels. He started with the name Evelyn remembered, Marcus. It took him 3 days of careful searching, but he found him. Marcus Delgado. Age 42. Former mechanic. Multiple arrests for insurance fraud. Currently living in Newark, New Jersey. Known for staging accidents that looked real. "This is the man," Samuel told Evelyn. "This is who Richard was talking to that night." They printed out Marcus's criminal record. His known associates. His history of making accidents happen. But it wasn't enough. It proved Marcus existed and was a criminal, but it didn't prove Richard had hired him. They needed more. Samuel reached out to a former military friend who now worked in private security. A man named James who owed Samuel several favors. "I need you to look into someone," Samuel told him over a secure phone line. Richard Hale. Investment manager. About to marry into serious money. "Tell me everything." James worked fast. Within 2 days, he sent an encrypted file. Samuel and Evelyn read it together on the old laptop. What they found made Evelyn's blood run cold. Richard Hale was drowning in debt. His investment firm was a facade. He had made terrible decisions, gambled with client money, lost everything in bad deals. He owed money to dangerous people. People who didn't accept excuses. He had been on the verge of bankruptcy when he met Evelyn. The documents showed everything. His accounts were deep in the red. He had taken loans from questionable sources. He had 3 months, maybe 4, before his house of cards collapsed completely. Meeting Evelyn wasn't chance. It was calculated. James had found evidence that Richard had researched her before their first meeting. He knew about David's death. Knew about the fortune she inherited. Knew she was lonely and vulnerable. He had positioned himself at events he knew she would attend. Made himself seem unavailable at first, knowing it would intrigue her. He had played a long game, and he had played it perfectly. The prenup he insisted on wasn't to protect both of them. It was crafted specifically to give him control. Once they married, he would have access to joint accounts. Power of attorney in case of her incapacity. Rights to her estate if she died. All legal. All documented. All perfectly positioned for him to take everything once she was gone. "He studied me," Evelyn said, her voice hollow. "Like I was a mark. A target." "Yes," Samuel said gently. "I'm sorry." She had thought Richard loved her for who she was. But he had loved her for what she had. She had thought he saw her. But he had seen her bank accounts. She had thought she was finally healing, moving forward. But she was just being set up. The betrayal hurt worse than the danger. Because David's love had been real. She knew that. She felt that. But Richard's love had been nothing but performance. A role he played convincingly because his survival depended on it. "We need to go to the police," Evelyn said. "Show them this." "Not yet," Samuel cautioned. "This proves he's in debt. Proves he had motive. But it doesn't prove he planned to kill you. His lawyers would say the prenup was standard. That the debt was temporary. That my overheard conversation was misunderstood or fabricated. We need more." What more is there? Evelyn asked, frustrated. We need him to incriminate himself, Samuel said. We need recorded proof. Concrete evidence that can't be explained away. How do we get that? We let him think he's won, Samuel replied. We let you come back. Evelyn stared at Samuel like he had suggested she jump off a cliff. You want me to go back to him? After everything we know? Not back to him, Samuel clarified. Back into the world. But carefully. Controlled. We contact the police. Say you had a breakdown. Wedding stress. Panic attack. You disappeared but now you're okay. You're sorry. You want to see Richard and apologize. He'll know something's wrong, Evelyn protested. Maybe, Samuel said. But he's invested 2 years in this. He's desperate. His debts are crushing him. If you come back, apologetic and vulnerable, he'll take the chance. He'll move forward with the plan. But this time, we'll be ready. We'll have you wired. We'll record everything. We'll catch him confessing. And if he doesn't confess? If he's too smart for that? Then we use Marcus, Samuel said. James has been watching him. Marcus is nervous. Richard hasn't paid him the full amount yet. He's getting antsy. If we approach him right, offer him immunity, he might flip on Richard. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. If I do this, she finally said, if I go back and pretend everything is fine, I have to be convincing. I have to make Richard believe I still trust him. I have to look at the man who planned to kill me and act like I love him. Yes, Samuel said. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. What if I can't? What if I look at him and he sees the truth in my eyes? Then we find another way, Samuel assured her. I won't let you do this if you're not ready. But madam, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You survived losing David. You survived building 2 successful businesses. You survived 4 years of grief. You can survive this. Evelyn looked down at her hands. They were no longer manicured. No longer elegant. They looked like they belonged to someone who had been hiding in a farmhouse for a week. When? She asked. We need a few more days, Samuel said. Let the media coverage peak. Let Richard get comfortable in his role as the devastated fiancé. Let people's sympathy for him grow. Then you appear. Confused. Apologetic. Broken. And he'll think he still has control. He'll think the plan can still work. Over the next 3 days, they prepared. Samuel contacted James, who had connections with law enforcement. They needed someone they could trust. Someone who would believe their story and help set up proper surveillance. James introduced them to Detective Linda Morrison. She was in her mid-40s, 20 years with the police force, specialized in fraud and conspiracy cases. She had seen enough in her career that nothing surprised her anymore. Samuel drove to meet her alone first, at a diner 2 hours away from the farmhouse. He brought all the evidence they had gathered. Marcus's criminal record. Richard's financial records. The timeline of how Richard had positioned himself to meet Evelyn. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting. She took notes. She asked specific questions. When Samuel finished, she sat back and sighed. This is circumstantial, she said. Everything you've shown me suggests motive and opportunity, but it doesn't prove intent to commit murder. A good lawyer would tear this apart in court. I know, Samuel said. That's why we need your help. We need to catch him in the act of planning. We need recorded confession or we need to flip his hired man. Detective Morrison was quiet for a moment. You're asking me to wire a civilian and send her back to a man who might be planning to kill her. That's dangerous. If anything goes wrong, if he suspects something, she could end up dead before we can intervene. I understand the risk, Samuel said. But she's willing. And she deserves justice. She deserves to know the truth. And she deserves to live without looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life. Detective Morrison studied Samuel's face. You care about her. This isn't just a job for you. No, Samuel admitted. It's not. I've driven her for 10 years. I've watched her grieve. I've watched her slowly heal. I've watched her learn to smile again. And I'll be damned if I let some con artist take that away from her. Detective Morrison nodded slowly. Okay. I'll help. But we do this my way. Proper equipment. Backup teams. Safety protocols. The moment I think she's in real danger, we pull her out. Agreed? Agreed, Samuel said. They spent the next 2 days planning every detail. Detective Morrison would officially find Evelyn. It would look like good police work. Evelyn would claim she had a panic attack on her wedding day, drove away, ended up confused and disoriented, stayed at various hotels using cash, and finally came to her senses. The story had to be believable but vague enough that it couldn't be easily disproven. Samuel would be portrayed as someone who panicked when she disappeared, drove around looking for her, and eventually went into hiding himself because he feared he would be blamed. They would both claim they had turned off their phones because they were scared and confused. It was thin, but it might work. Richard would be suspicious, certainly, but if Evelyn played her part convincingly, his desperation might override his caution. On the 8th day after her disappearance, Evelyn Carter was found. Detective Morrison held a press conference. After extensive investigation, we located Ms. Carter in upstate New York. She is safe and unharmed. She has provided a statement explaining her absence. We are treating this as a mental health crisis, not a criminal matter. The family requests privacy at this time. The news exploded. Relief. Celebration. Questions. Criticism from those who thought she had wasted police resources. But mostly relief. Richard appeared on camera immediately, tears streaming down his face. Thank God, he said. Thank God she's safe. That's all that matters. I don't care about anything else. I just want to see her. He was taken to a private location where Evelyn waited. When he walked into the room, his face was perfect concern and love. He rushed to her, wrapped his arms around her, held her tight. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered into her hair. I thought something terrible had happened. Evelyn forced herself not to stiffen. Not to pull away. She leaned into his embrace and let herself cry. Real tears, but not for the reasons he thought. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I don't know what happened. I just panicked. Everything felt overwhelming. The wedding, the crowd, the pressure. I couldn't breathe. I just drove. I wasn't thinking. I'm so sorry. Shoo, Richard soothed, stroking her hair. It's okay. You're safe now. That's all that matters. We'll figure everything else out. We'll get you help. Whatever you need. He pulled back and looked at her face, his hands on her cheeks. I love you, he said. That hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. She looked into his eyes. The eyes she had trusted. The eyes that had looked at her with what she thought was love. And she saw nothing behind them. Just calculation. Just performance. But she smiled. I love you too, she said. The words tasted like poison. Over the next week, Richard was attentive and caring. He suggested postponing the wedding indefinitely. No pressure. Just focus on her mental health. He arranged for her to see a therapist, someone from his own network. He suggested she take time away from managing her estate. Let me handle the stress, he offered. You just focus on healing. To everyone watching, he was the perfect supportive partner. But Evelyn, now watching closely, saw the other things. The way he pushed to complete certain legal documents, just for clarity. The way he suggested she update her will, just in case something happens. The way he slowly positioned himself as essential to every aspect of her life. And she played along. She acted fragile. Confused. Dependent. She let him think he was succeeding. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison's team was building their case. They had surveillance on Richard. They tracked his calls. They monitored his meetings. And they discovered he had contacted Marcus twice since Evelyn's return. The calls were brief and vague, but they confirmed ongoing communication. "We need to move faster," Detective Morrison told Samuel. "He's getting nervous. I think he's going to accelerate his timeline." "How much time do we have?" Samuel asked. "Maybe 2 weeks. 3 at most. Then I think he'll make his move." They fitted Evelyn with a sophisticated recording device. Tiny microphone embedded in a necklace Richard had given her. Seemed poetic somehow, using his own gift to trap him. The plan was for Evelyn to push him gently. Mention going on a trip. Suggest driving somewhere remote. See if he would take the bait. But Richard moved first. 2 days after she was fitted with the wire, he came to her with a suggestion. They were having dinner at her estate. Quiet evening. Just the two of them. "I've been thinking," Richard said, cutting his steak carefully. "You need to get away. Really away. Somewhere peaceful where you can recover from all this stress." "What did you have in mind?" Evelyn asked, her heart racing but her voice calm. "Vermont," he said. "There's this beautiful resort in the mountains. Very private. Very quiet. We could drive up there. Take our time. Stay a week or 2. No phones. No media. No pressure. Just us and nature. Vermont. Winding mountain roads. Remote location." Exactly what Samuel had overheard in that phone call. "That sounds wonderful," Evelyn said, smiling. "When? How about this weekend?" Richard suggested. "I've already made reservations. The place is beautiful. You'll love it." "This weekend?" Evelyn pretended to consider. "I suppose I could clear my schedule." "Yes. Let's do it." Richard's smile widened. "Perfect. I'll arrange everything. We'll take the scenic route. Make it a real road trip. Leave early Saturday morning." After he left that evening, Evelyn met with Detective Morrison and Samuel in a secure location. "He's making his move," Morrison said grimly. "Vermont. This weekend. That gives us 3 days to prepare." "What's the plan?" Evelyn asked. "We follow you," Morrison explained. "Unmarked vehicles at a distance. We monitor the wire constantly. The moment he does or says anything incriminating, we move in. We'll also have teams coordinating with Vermont State Police." "What about Marcus?" Samuel asked. "We picked him up this morning," Morrison said with satisfaction. "Offered him a deal. Immunity for testimony. He's scared and he's talking. Confirmed Richard hired him to stage a car accident. Paid him $50,000 up front with another $100,000 promised once the job was done. Marcus was supposed to meet Richard in Vermont this weekend to finalize details." Evelyn felt cold. It was all real. Every terrible thing Samuel had warned her about was absolutely real. "So Richard is driving me to Vermont to hand me over to a man who's going to kill me," she said flatly. "He was," Morrison corrected. "Now he's driving you to Vermont where we're going to arrest him for conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus is willing to testify. Combined with the recording we'll get during the drive, we'll have him. What if he doesn't say anything incriminating during the drive?" Evelyn asked. "Then we have Marcus's testimony," Morrison said. It's not as strong without the recording, but it's enough for an arrest. Richard doesn't know. Marcus flipped. He'll likely call him during the trip to confirm timing. That call alone might be enough. The next 3 days were the longest of Evelyn's life. She had to act normal. Had to act excited about the trip. Had to pack bags and smile and pretend she was looking forward to a romantic getaway with the man who planned to murder her. Samuel watched her carefully. "You don't have to do this," he said the night before they were scheduled to leave. "We have enough to bring him in now. Marcus's testimony. The financial records. You don't have to put yourself in danger." "Yes, I do," Evelyn said. "I need to hear him say it. I need to hear him admit what he planned. I need to know beyond any doubt that everything between us was a lie. Otherwise, I'll always wonder. I'll always have that small voice asking, what if Samuel was wrong? What if it was all a misunderstanding?" Samuel nodded. He understood. Some truths need to be heard to be believed. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Richard picked Evelyn up at 8 o'clock, driving his luxury SUV. He was in a good mood. Cheerful. Playing the perfect attentive partner. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked, loading her bag into the back. "Ready," Evelyn said, touching the necklace at her throat. The microphone was active. Detective Morrison and her team were listening. Surveillance vehicles were positioned and ready to follow at a safe distance. They drove north. Through small towns and countryside. Past farms and forests. Richard talked about the resort. About hiking trails and spa treatments. About how this would be good for Evelyn's recovery. "I'm just glad we're doing this," Evelyn said, following the script they had planned. "After everything that happened, I was afraid you'd want to call off the wedding completely." "Never," Richard said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You had a moment of panic. It's understandable. We'll get through it together." "But the wedding," Evelyn pressed gently. "All those guests. All that money spent. Your friends must think I'm crazy." "They'll understand," Richard assured her. "And we'll reschedule. Maybe something smaller. Less overwhelming. What matters is that we end up together. That's the goal. Everything else is just details." The goal. Everything else is just details. Evelyn felt sick but kept her expression neutral. They stopped for lunch at a small diner. Evelyn excused herself to use the bathroom. In the stall, she whispered to the microphone. "I'm okay. He hasn't said anything yet. Keep following." She didn't know if anyone responded. She couldn't wear an earpiece without Richard noticing. She was operating blind, trusting that Morrison's team was out there somewhere. When she returned to the table, Richard was on his phone. He hung up quickly when he saw her. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said. "Just checking on a work thing." But his energy had shifted slightly. He seemed more focused. More alert. They got back on the road. The mountains grew closer. The roads became more winding. More isolated. Richard turned onto a scenic route. Fewer cars. More curves. Beautiful views but dangerous drops. "This is gorgeous," Evelyn said, looking out the window at the valleys below. "Isn't it?" Richard agreed. "Very peaceful. Very quiet. You could have an accident up here and no one would find you for hours. Maybe days." The words hung in the air. Evelyn's heart stopped. "What?" she asked, turning to look at him. Richard's expression hadn't changed. Still friendly. Still calm. "I said it's very peaceful and quiet," he repeated. "Easy to forget the rest of the world exists." Had she misheard? Or had he deliberately said it that way? She couldn't tell. The next hour passed in tense silence. Richard seemed lost in thought. Evelyn pretended to doze, her hand resting near the necklace, wondering if the microphone was picking up anything useful. Then Richard's phone rang. He answered it through the car's speaker system before realizing Evelyn was awake. "Yeah," he said curtly. "We're about an hour out," a male voice responded. "Marcus." "Good," Richard said. "Everything ready?" "Just like we discussed," Marcus confirmed. "But I need the rest of the money." "You promised 100,000. I've only seen 50. Richard glanced at Evelyn. She kept her expression sleepy and confused. "Not now," Richard said. "We'll discuss it when I get there." "I'm serious," Marcus pressed. "I'm not doing anything until I see the money." "You'll get your money," Richard snapped. "Just be where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do." He hung up abruptly. Evelyn sat up straighter. "Who was that?" "No one," Richard said. "Business call." It sounded tense. "It's fine." His voice was sharp now. The mask was slipping. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes. Then Richard pulled off onto a scenic overlook. Beautiful view. No other cars. He turned off the engine. "Why are we stopping?" Evelyn asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard turned to look at her. Really look at her. And for the first time since she had known him, she saw his real face. No warmth. No love. Just cold calculation. "You know," he said quietly. "Don't you?" Evelyn's blood turned to ice. "Know what?" Richard laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "Don't insult my intelligence, Evelyn. You've been different since you came back. Playing the part of the fragile, confused woman, but watching. Always watching. And that driver of yours. Samuel. He disappeared at the same time you did. That's not a coincidence." Evelyn's mind raced. "Stay calm. Keep him talking. The wire was recording everything. I don't know what you're talking about. Samuel and I were both confused. We both made mistakes. He overheard me," Richard said. "That night before the wedding. I was on the phone outside. I thought I was alone. But he was in the car, wasn't he? He heard everything. There was no point in lying anymore." "Yes," Evelyn said. "He heard you planning to kill me. He heard you talking about making it look like an accident. He heard you admit that everything between us was fake." Richard nodded slowly. "Smart man. Loyal. I underestimated him. I thought he was just an old driver who followed orders. I should have been more careful." "So it's all true," Evelyn said. "Everything Samuel told me. You never loved me. You were just after my money." "Love," Richard scoffed. "What is love compared to survival? I was drowning, Evelyn. Serious people wanted serious money. I had 3 months before they broke my legs, or worse. I needed a solution. You were the solution. So you researched me. Found me. Courted me. Made me believe you cared. I did what was necessary," Richard said without emotion. "And it would have worked perfectly. You would have had a tragic accident on our honeymoon. Everyone would have sympathized with the grieving widower. I would have inherited everything, paid my debts, and moved on with my life. Clean. Simple. Profitable. Except Samuel warned me," Evelyn said. "Except Samuel warned you," Richard agreed. "Which created complications. When you disappeared on our wedding day, I knew something was wrong. But I played the concerned fiancé because what else could I do? If I ran, I'd look guilty. If I acted relieved, people would question it. So I played the part and hoped you'd either turn up dead or stay gone forever. And when I came back, I thought maybe I still had a chance," Richard admitted. Maybe you really did just have a breakdown. Maybe Samuel had talked you into running but you didn't believe him. Maybe I could still salvage the plan. So I stayed attentive. Stayed patient. Moved the timeline up. Vermont this weekend instead of 3 months from now. Why wait? Your mental state is already fragile. An accident would be even more believable. Evelyn felt tears running down her face. Not from fear now, but from rage. How could you? How could you look at someone who had already lost so much and decide to take her life? Because you have what I need, Richard said simply. It's not personal. It's practical. You're a means to an end. And Marcus? The man you hired to kill me? He's waiting down the road, Richard said. He'll force us off the cliff. Make it look like we swerved to avoid an animal. I'll be injured but alive. You'll be dead. Tragic accident. No one's fault. Except I'm not going down that road, Evelyn said. Richard smiled. Yes, you are. Because what are you going to do? Jump out of the car? We're on a mountain. There's nowhere to run. And I'm bigger and stronger than you. You're coming with me, one way or another. No, Evelyn said clearly. I'm not. That's when Detective Morrison's voice came through a megaphone from somewhere in the trees. Richard Hale, this is the police. Step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. You are under arrest. Richard's face went white. He looked around wildly. Police vehicles emerged from the woods where they had been hidden. Officers surrounded the car. You were wearing a wire, Richard said, staring at Evelyn. This whole time. Yes, Evelyn said. And you just confessed to everything. Richard lunged for her, but she was already opening the car door and scrambling out. Officers rushed forward, pulling Richard from the vehicle as he struggled and screamed. She set me up. This is entrapment. My lawyers will destroy this. But the recording was clear. His confession was detailed. And Marcus, already in custody, was willing to testify to everything. It was over. Richard Hale was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and half a dozen other crimes. His lawyers tried everything. Argued entrapment. Argued illegal recording. Argued that Richard was just making empty threats and never intended to follow through. But Marcus's testimony combined with the recording and Richard's financial desperation painted a clear picture. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Evelyn testified. Samuel testified. Marcus testified. Financial experts testified about Richard's crushing debts and his deliberate positioning to meet and marry Evelyn. Phone records showed multiple calls between Richard and Marcus. Text messages discussed timing and payment in vague terms that became very clear in context. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Richard showed no emotion when the verdict was read. But as he was led away, he looked at Evelyn one last time. You would have been dead, he said. If your driver had minded his own business, you would be dead and I would be rich. Remember that. You survived because of luck. No, Evelyn said calmly. I survived because someone who truly cared about me had the courage to speak up. That's not luck. That's love. Richard was sentenced to 30 years without possibility of parole. Marcus received 10 years for his cooperation. The media coverage was intense for months. Wealthy widow nearly murdered by fiancé. Driver saves employer's life. Wedding day disappearance ends in dramatic arrest. Evelyn gave one interview. Just one. She sat down with a respected journalist and told the whole story. She spoke about David, her first husband, and real love. She spoke about grief and vulnerability. She spoke about how predators target people who are hurting. She spoke about Richard's calculated manipulation. And she spoke about Samuel. For 10 years, Samuel drove me places, she said in the interview. He was professional. Quiet. Always on time. I never asked about his life. I never thought about what he might be observing or feeling. To me, he was just the driver. But to him, I was a person worth protecting. He risked his job, his reputation, possibly his freedom, to save my life. He saw danger that everyone else missed because he actually paid attention. He actually cared. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful for that. The interviewer asked the question everyone wanted to know. Do you think you'll ever marry again? Evelyn smiled sadly. I had real love with David. I know what that feels like. So I know that what I had with Richard was performance. And I'm okay being alone. I'd rather be alone and safe than coupled and manipulated. Not everyone needs a partner to be whole. After the trial, Evelyn made changes. She sold the Connecticut estate. Too many memories, both real and false. She bought a smaller place in Vermont, ironically. A beautiful old farmhouse, nothing like the one she hid in, but sturdy and peaceful. She established a foundation to help victims of financial manipulation and domestic abuse. She funded shelters. She hired lawyers to help people escape dangerous relationships. She created programs to teach people how to recognize red flags in romantic relationships. She spoke at conferences about her experience. Not for attention, but because she knew her story could save lives. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells around someone, she would say, if you find yourself constantly making excuses for their behavior, if people who love you express concerns and you get defensive, those are warning signs. Listen to your instincts. Listen to people who have no agenda except your well-being. And Samuel? Evelyn tried to give him money. Tried to give him a house. Tried to give him anything he wanted as thanks for saving her life. He refused it all. I don't need a reward for doing the right thing, he said. But I would like to keep driving you, if that's all right. Someone needs to make sure you stay safe. Evelyn laughed through tears. I would be honored. So Samuel continued to drive her. To her foundation meetings. To speaking events. To her new home in Vermont. But their relationship changed. He wasn't just the driver anymore. He was her friend. Her protector. Her reminder that loyalty and decency still existed in the world. They had dinner together sometimes. She asked about his life, his military service, his family. He told her stories she'd never heard. They became real people to each other, not just employer and employee. Why did you do it? Evelyn asked him once, a year after the trial. Why did you risk everything for me? Samuel was quiet for a moment. My daughter, he finally said. I had a daughter once. Beautiful girl. Smart. Loving. She married young to a man who seemed perfect. Charming. Successful. Everyone loved him. But he was controlling. Manipulative. And one night, they had an argument. He pushed her down the stairs. Said it was an accident. Maybe it was. But she died. And I spent years wishing I had seen the signs. Wishing I had asked more questions. Wishing I had protected her. Tears rolled down Evelyn's face. I'm so sorry, Samuel. When I heard Richard planning your death, Samuel continued, I thought about my daughter. I thought, not again. I won't stay silent again. Even if you hated me for it. Even if I was wrong and ruined your happiness. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try. Because maybe I couldn't save my daughter. But I could save you. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. You did save me. In every way a person can be saved. 3 years passed. Evelyn's foundation grew. They had helped over 500 people escape dangerous relationships. They had funded legal representation for victims. They had created educational programs that ran in schools and community centers. Evelyn received letters constantly. From people who recognized warning signs in their own relationships after hearing her speak. From people who left situations that could have killed them. From family members who finally understood what their loved one had been going through. One letter stood out. It was from a young woman named Sarah. "I was engaged," Sarah wrote. "He was perfect. Everyone said so. But your story made me think about some things. How he had encouraged me to quit my job so we could focus on our future together. How he wanted me to move to a different city where I didn't know anyone. How he had suggested I give him power of attorney, just in case. How he had taken out a large life insurance policy on me, saying it was responsible planning. Individually, these things seemed reasonable. But together, after hearing your story, they formed a pattern. I broke off the engagement. He was furious. Threatened me. That's when I knew I had made the right choice. You saved my life without ever meeting me. Thank you." These letters sustained Evelyn. Reminded her that her pain had purpose. That something good had come from something terrible. She also stayed connected with Detective Morrison, who had become a friend. "You ever regret not going through with the wedding?" Morrison asked once, half joking. Just to see what would have happened. "Not for a second," Evelyn replied. "I got something better than a wedding. I got my life. I got clarity. I got purpose. Richard wanted to take everything from me. Instead, he gave me a reason to fight for others." Samuel eventually retired fully, though he still drove Evelyn for special occasions. He moved to a small house near her Vermont property. They had coffee most mornings. Played chess in the evenings. Became the kind of friends who didn't need to fill silence with words. On the anniversary of what would have been her wedding day, Evelyn and Samuel always did something together. Sometimes they drove to the overlook where Richard had confessed. Sometimes they visited the old farmhouse where she had hidden. Sometimes they just sat and talked about how different life was from what they had expected. "Do you think about him?" Samuel asked once. "About Richard?" "Sometimes," Evelyn admitted. "I think about how convincing he was. How completely he fooled me. How close I came to marrying him. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I think about that alternate timeline. The one where you didn't overhear that phone call. The one where I walked down the aisle. The one where I'm dead." "But you're not," Samuel reminded her. "You're here. You're alive. You're helping people. That's the timeline we're in. Because of you," Evelyn said. "Because you refused to stay silent." Samuel shook his head. "Because you had the courage to listen. A lot of people in your position would have dismissed me. Would have accused me of jealousy or sabotage. Would have gone through with the wedding anyway. But you listened to your instincts. You chose survival over your dreams of happiness. That took more courage than anything I did." "Maybe we both get credit," Evelyn suggested. Samuel smiled. "Maybe we do." Years continued to pass. Richard remained in prison, appealing his sentence unsuccessfully. Marcus served his time and, upon release, contacted Evelyn's foundation. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he wrote. "What I agreed to do was unforgivable. But I want to do something useful with whatever life I have left. Can I volunteer? Can I help?" Evelyn met with him once. He was older, grayer, worn down by prison and guilt. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "You shouldn't," Marcus said honestly. "I don't trust myself. But I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to make different choices. Your foundation teaches people to recognize when someone is dangerous. I can help with that. I can tell them what men like me look like. How we think. What warning signs to watch for." Evelyn considered. "You'll work with our education team. You'll speak to groups about your perspective. You'll be honest about what you did and why. And if you mess up even once, you're gone. Clear. Clear, Marcus agreed. His testimony became some of the Foundation's most powerful content. A man who had been hired to murder explaining exactly how these arrangements work. How people like Richard find people like him. How the violence industry operates. It was disturbing but valuable. The Foundation's work expanded internationally. Other countries invited Evelyn to speak. Her story resonated across cultures because predatory behavior isn't limited by borders. Women around the world recognized patterns in her story that reflected their own experiences. Men, too. Because while Evelyn's story involved a male predator, she made clear that manipulation and financial abuse can go any direction. She worked with organizations that supported male victims. That acknowledged everyone deserves protection and belief. On her 60th birthday, Evelyn threw a party. Not a big fancy affair like the wedding would have been. Just friends. Real friends. People who had supported her. People from the Foundation. Detective Morrison. Samuel and his family. Her sister and her nieces. People who had been helped by the Foundation flew in to thank her in person. Stories were shared. Tears were shed. Laughter filled the room. Samuel raised a glass for a toast. To Evelyn, he said. Who taught us that survival is just the beginning. What matters is what you do with the life you've saved. And she chose to save others. That's not just survival. That's heroism. Everyone raised their glasses. Evelyn blushed. I'm not a hero, she protested. You are, Detective Morrison countered. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and transformed it into something that saves lives. That's the definition of a hero. Later that evening, Evelyn stood on her porch looking at the stars. Vermont nights were so clear. So peaceful. Nothing like those terrifying days in the farmhouse, or that drive to the mountains with a man who planned to kill her. Samuel joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. Quite a party, he said. Quite a life, Evelyn replied. They stood in comfortable silence. Do you ever wonder what David would think? Samuel asked. Of all this? Of the Foundation and everything? Evelyn smiled. I think he would be proud. He always believed in turning pain into purpose. And I think he would have liked you. You're both protectors at heart. I wish I could have met him, Samuel said. Would have been nice to know the man who made you believe in love enough to try again. Even though trying again almost killed me? Evelyn asked wryly. Even though, Samuel confirmed. Because the capacity to hope, to trust, to open your heart despite risk, that's not a weakness. That's strength. Richard didn't break that in you. You still help people. You still believe in love. You just know now to trust the right voices. Evelyn thought about that. It was true. She wasn't cynical or closed off. She had male friends. She had dinner with people. She opened her heart in different ways now. She just did it with wisdom she had paid dearly to learn. You saved more than my life that day, she told Samuel. You saved my faith that good people exist. That someone would stand up for what's right even when it's hard. That loyalty and decency aren't dead. You gave me back my belief in humanity. Samuel's eyes were wet. And you gave me redemption for not saving my daughter. You gave me a second chance to protect someone. You gave my story a different ending. They raised their teacups. To second chances, Evelyn said. To speaking up, Samuel added. To listening, Evelyn continued. To surviving, Samuel finished. They clinked cups and drank, 2 people who had saved each other in different ways. The foundation Evelyn built became her greatest legacy. Long after her story faded from headlines, the work continued. They developed a questionnaire, free online, that helped people evaluate their relationships for warning signs. Was your partner isolating you from friends and family? Were they controlling your finances? Were they pressuring you to make legal commitments quickly? Did they become angry when questioned? Did people who loved you express concerns? The questionnaire was accessed millions of times. Evelyn received messages from people all over the world. I thought I was going crazy, but your questionnaire validated my concerns. I took the questionnaire on my partner's behalf and realized I was the problem. I'm getting help now. My daughter wouldn't listen to me, but she took your questionnaire and finally saw what I'd been trying to tell her. They also created resources for people like Samuel. Bystanders who saw something wrong but didn't know how to intervene. How to help someone in a controlling relationship became one of their most downloaded guides. It taught people to express concerns without judgment. To stay connected even when the victim pulled away. To document concerning behaviors. To offer resources without pushing. To be patient because leaving often takes multiple attempts. The guide included Samuel's story. How he had stayed professional for years. How he had noticed small things. How he had struggled with whether to speak up. How he had ultimately risked everything because silence felt worse than consequences. If you see something, the guide concluded, say something. But say it with love. Say it with support. Say it with resources and commitment. Don't just warn someone and walk away. Stay. Help. Be there for the aftermath. That's when they'll need you most. Evelyn also wrote a book. She resisted for years, but her sister finally convinced her. Your story can reach more people in a book than in 100 speeches, she argued. The book, titled The Driver Who Knew, became a bestseller. Not because people loved the drama, though it was dramatic. But because Evelyn wrote with brutal honesty about every mistake she made. About dismissing red flags. About wanting love so badly she ignored instincts. About how grief made her vulnerable. About how wealth made her a target. About how she had almost married her murderer because he said what she wanted to hear. I'm not writing this so you'll admire me, she wrote in the introduction. I'm writing this so you'll recognize yourself. Because I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive. I was accomplished and intelligent and still nearly died because I trusted the wrong person. It can happen to anyone. It does happen to anyone. And if my story makes even one person pause and reconsider a relationship that feels wrong, then every terrible thing I went through will have mattered. The book included chapters from Samuel's perspective. Detective Morrison's perspective. Even Marcus's perspective, explaining how he had become someone who would agree to murder for money. The multi-perspective approach showed how one event ripples through many lives. Schools started using the book in psychology and sociology classes. Book clubs discussed it. Support groups for abuse survivors read it together and shared their own stories. It became more than Evelyn's story. It became a mirror in which thousands of people saw themselves. 5 years after Richard's conviction, a journalist did a follow-up piece. Where are they now? The journalist interviewed Evelyn at her Vermont home. Asked about her life now. Her foundation. Her relationships. Do you date? The journalist asked. Sometimes, Evelyn said. Casually. Coffee. Dinner. Conversations. But I'm not looking for marriage. I'm not trying to fill a void. I'm complete as I am. If someone wonderful came along and added to my life rather than trying to become my whole life, maybe. But I'm not waiting for that. I'm living fully right now. What about trust? Can you trust people after what Richard did? I trust. Differently, Evelyn explained. I trust slowly. I trust with verification. I trust when actions match words over time. And I trust the people who have proven themselves. Samuel. My sister. My real friends. Richard didn't break my ability to trust. He refined it. The journalist asked Samuel similar questions. Do you regret not speaking up sooner? Before the wedding was even planned? Every day, Samuel admitted. I saw signs early. I dismissed them. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself I might be wrong. And I almost let my silence kill someone I cared about. So no, I don't regret speaking up when I did. I regret not speaking up sooner. What would you say to others in your position? People who work for wealthy families and see things. Samuel thought carefully. I'd say your job is to serve, but your humanity requires you to protect. If you see something dangerous, you have a moral obligation that supersedes your employment contract. Yes, you might lose your job. Yes, you might be wrong and face consequences. But if you're right and you stay silent, you have to live with that. And trust me, losing a job is easier to live with than losing someone you could have saved. The journalist's final question to Evelyn was the one everyone wondered. If you could go back and change anything, what would it be? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I wouldn't change meeting Richard, she finally said. Because that experience, as terrible as it was, gave me purpose. It taught me lessons I needed to learn. It led me to the work I do now. The people I've helped. The lives that have been saved because I learned to recognize predatory patterns. If I hadn't almost died, I couldn't teach others how to survive. But, she continued, I would change one thing. I would have treated Samuel as a human being sooner. I would have asked about his life. I would have seen him as more than just someone who drove me places. I was guilty of the same thing Richard was, in a way. I didn't see Samuel. I saw his function. It took him saving my life for me to recognize his worth. That's my shame. And that's what I try to teach now. Everyone around you is a full human being with their own story, their own wisdom, their own value. The housekeeper who cleans your home sees things. The assistant who schedules your appointments notices patterns. The driver who takes you places observes behavior. These aren't invisible people. They're humans with insights. Listen to them. Value them. They might save your life. Evelyn's nieces grew up hearing her story. Not the sensationalized version from the news, but the real version. The human version. The messy, complicated, terrifying version. Her oldest niece, Jennifer, was 12 when it happened. She remembered her mother crying when Aunt Evelyn disappeared. Remembered the tension in the house when news came that she'd been found. Remembered the trial and the whispered conversations adults had when they thought children weren't listening. By the time Jennifer was in college, she had decided on her career path, psychology, specializing in trauma and relationship violence. Your story changed my life, Jennifer told Evelyn when she graduated. It showed me that danger doesn't always look dangerous. That bad people don't always look bad. That intelligence and education and success don't protect you from manipulation. I want to help people the way you do. Is there room at the foundation for me? Evelyn hugged her niece tightly. There's always room. Jennifer joined the foundation staff. She brought fresh perspectives. New research. Digital age insights about how predators now use social media to target and groom victims. She developed programs for teenagers about healthy relationships. About consent. About red flags. About how to help friends who might be in trouble. Young people think it won't happen to them, Jennifer explained at a staff meeting. They think they're too smart, too aware, too modern. But predatory behavior evolves. It uses new platforms and new techniques. We have to evolve too. Under Jennifer's leadership, the foundation created TikTok content, Instagram resources, podcasts discussing relationship dynamics. They met young people where they were, speaking their language, addressing their specific vulnerabilities. One podcast episode featured Samuel as a guest. He was in his late 70s now, still sharp, still thoughtful. He talked about recognizing danger. About the responsibility of witnesses. About courage and consequences. The episode went viral. Millions of downloads. Thousands of comments from people saying, "I'm the Samuel in my friend's life. I've been afraid to speak up. This gave me courage. I wish someone had been my Samuel. I wish someone had warned me. I'm going to be more observant. More willing to say something when something feels wrong." The ripple effects continued spreading. Samuel received letters from around the world. From people thanking him. From other drivers, housekeepers, staff members who had their own stories of seeing danger and struggling with whether to intervene. He answered every letter personally. Always with the same message: trust your instincts. Speak up with love. Be prepared for consequences, but know that silence has consequences too. You might save a life. On Samuel's 80th birthday, Evelyn threw him a party. She invited everyone whose life had intersected with theirs because of that wedding day. Detective Morrison, now retired. Marcus, who had completed his prison sentence and worked full-time at the foundation. Jennifer and her team. People who had been helped by the foundation over the years. Some flew in from other countries. The theme of the party was simple: for those who speak up. People shared stories. A woman talked about how her sister's friend had warned her about her fiancé's controlling behavior. She hadn't listened at first, but the warning planted a seed. When the abuse started, she remembered the warning and left before it escalated. A man talked about how his coworker had reported concerning behavior from his girlfriend. He had been angry initially, thought it was jealousy. But investigation revealed she was systematically stealing from him and had forged his signature on loan documents. The coworker's report had saved him from financial ruin. A teenager talked about how their school counselor had noticed bruises and asked questions. The teenager had lied at first, protecting their abusive parent. But the counselor kept checking in. Kept offering help. Kept being present. Eventually, the teenager told the truth and was removed from danger. Story after story. People who had been saved because someone cared enough to speak up. Samuel sat listening, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I don't deserve this," he kept saying. "Yes, you do," Evelyn told him firmly. "You started something. You showed that ordinary people doing the right thing can change everything. You're not just the man who saved me. You're the inspiration for thousands of others to save people in their own lives." During the party, they announced a new initiative, the Samuel Award for Moral Courage. It would be given annually to ordinary people who spoke up to protect others despite personal risk. Nominees would come from all walks of life. The first recipient would be a janitor who reported suspicious behavior by a respected professor, leading to discovery of that professor's exploitation of students. "I just cleaned his office," the janitor said when accepting the award. "But I saw things. Strange things. Students coming out crying. Documents that seemed wrong. I almost said nothing because who would believe a janitor over a professor? But then I remembered Samuel's story. I thought about how he was just a driver, but he saved someone's life. So I reported what I saw. And it mattered." The award ceremony made headlines. The conversation shifted from celebrating heroes with traditional power to recognizing heroes in everyday positions. The people who see things because they're present but often invisible. The Foundation's mission expanded to include advocacy for better protections for workers who report dangerous situations. For stronger whistleblower protections. For legal frameworks that encouraged speaking up rather than punishing it. Evelyn testified before legislative committees. Samuel spoke at conferences. Jennifer organized campaigns. The work grew beyond just helping victims escape. It became about creating systems that made escape easier and prevention stronger. In prison, Richard Hale had time to think. Years of it. At first, he remained defiant. His appeals blamed everyone but himself. Evelyn had entrapped him. The police had violated his rights. His lawyer had been incompetent. The jury had been biased. But appeals courts disagreed. The conviction stood. The sentence stood. Reality set in. He wasn't getting out. Not for decades, if ever. Slowly, something changed. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was confronting the fact that his carefully constructed life had completely collapsed. Maybe it was mandated therapy sessions with a prison psychologist who refused to let him deflect. "You plan to murder someone," the psychologist said in one session. "Not in passion. Not in rage. Calculated, premeditated murder. Help me understand how you justified that to yourself." Richard had dodged this question for months. But finally, he attempted an answer. "I didn't think of it as murder," he said slowly. "I thought of it as a solution to a problem. My problem was debt. Her death was the solution. I compartmentalized it. Made it abstract. But she was a person," the psychologist pressed. "A woman who had already lost a husband. A woman who trusted you. How did you not see her humanity?" Richard was quiet for a long time. "I saw it," he finally admitted. "That's the terrible truth. I saw her grief. Her loneliness. Her hope that maybe life could be good again. And I used it. I weaponized her vulnerability. I knew exactly what I was doing. Why? Because my needs were more important than her life," Richard said flatly. "At least that's what I told myself. I was drowning and she was a life raft. I didn't care that grabbing the raft would sink her. I just wanted to survive. And now? Now I'm alive and she's alive and I'm in here and she's out there helping people," Richard said. "Now I see that my survival would have been built on her corpse. Now I see that I wasn't the victim of bad circumstances. I was a predator who chose to hunt someone vulnerable. Now I see that I destroyed my own life by trying to steal hers. It wasn't a clean redemption. Richard didn't become a good person through revelation. But he stopped lying to himself. He stopped blaming others. He acknowledged what he had done and why." The prison psychologist asked if he would be willing to be interviewed for Evelyn's foundation. To provide the predator's perspective. To help people understand how someone could plan such a thing. Richard initially refused. Why would I help her? But over time, he reconsidered. Maybe, he finally told the psychologist, maybe if people understand how I thought, they can recognize others who think the same way. Maybe my perspective has some value, even if I don't. He recorded a video interview. It was disturbing but educational. He explained how he had researched Evelyn. How he had crafted a persona he knew she would respond to. How he had deliberately positioned himself as the opposite of what she'd fear, patient, understanding, undemanding. "I studied her the way a hunter studies prey," he said in the interview. "I learned what she needed emotionally and I became that. It wasn't hard. People are predictable when you know what they're missing in life. Evelyn was missing companionship, partnership, love. I provided the appearance of all three." "How did you feel about her?" the interviewer asked. "Feel?" Richard seemed confused by the question. "I didn't feel much of anything. She was nice. Pleasant. But she wasn't real to me as a person. She was an asset to acquire. I felt about her the way you might feel about a profitable business deal. Satisfaction when it progressed. Frustration when there were complications. But not love. Never love. Do you feel remorse now?" "I feel something," Richard said carefully. "I don't know if it's real remorse or just regret that I got caught. I've been in therapy for years and I still don't fully understand my own emotions. But I know what I did was wrong. I know it was monstrous. I know if I had succeeded, I would have destroyed a woman who had never done anything except survive loss and try to hope again. That matters to me now in a way it didn't then. If you could speak to Evelyn, what would you say? Richard looked directly at the camera. I would say, you were right not to trust me. You were right to run. You were right to believe Samuel over me. Your instincts tried to tell you something was wrong and I'm glad you finally listened. I would also say, thank you for using what happened to you to protect others. You could have become bitter and closed off. Instead, you became a shield for vulnerable people. That's more than I deserve, but it's what you are. And finally, I would say, I'm sorry isn't enough. It will never be enough. But I'm sorry anyway. The video was difficult to watch. But the Foundation used it in training. Showed it to people learning to recognize manipulation. Showed it to law enforcement learning to investigate financial predators. Showed it to therapists working with both victims and perpetrators. Because understanding how predators think is part of protecting against them. Evelyn watched the video once. Just once. Do you believe him? Jennifer asked afterward. Does it matter? Evelyn replied. Whether his remorse is real or performed, the information is valuable. People can see how he thinks. How he planned. How he justified. That helps more than his feelings do. Does it give you closure? I got closure when he was convicted, Evelyn said. I got more closure when I started helping people. I don't need anything from Richard. Not his apology. Not his remorse. Not his explanation. I needed justice and I got it. The rest is just information. 10 years after that wedding day, Evelyn stood on the same grounds where her ceremony had been supposed to happen. The estate had been sold long ago, but the new owners had allowed her to visit for an anniversary event. The Foundation was hosting a gala. A decade of speaking up was the theme. Survivors. Advocates. Law enforcement. Counselors. Social workers. Educators. Everyone who had contributed to the work of protecting vulnerable people. The evening air was warm. White light strung through trees. Not so different from how it had looked that wedding day, except the energy was completely different. That day had been about one couple, one ceremony, one beginning that was actually going to be an ending. This day was about community. About all the lives that had been changed because one driver refused to stay silent. Samuel attended, though he used a wheelchair now. 85 years old. Still sharp mentally, but his body was failing. He sat near the stage, Evelyn beside him, watching people mingle. 10 years, Samuel said. Who would have thought? You, Evelyn replied. You thought. You knew something terrible was happening and you acted. Everything that followed came from that choice. A lot of people had to make choices after mine, Samuel pointed out. You had to choose to believe me. Detective Morrison had to choose to help. Marcus had to choose to testify. Jennifer had to choose this career. Every person here tonight made choices that led to this. That's how change works, Evelyn agreed. One person speaks up. Another listens. Another acts. It ripples out. But someone has to throw the first stone in the water. You were that stone. The gala began. Survivors shared their stories. Some had left abusive marriages. Some had escaped financial exploitation. Some had been saved from trafficking. Some had recognized grooming behavior and protected their children. Some had been warned by friends and initially angry but later grateful. The stories varied but the theme was consistent. Someone spoke up, and that changed everything. Awards were given. The Samuel Award for Moral Courage went to 5 people this year. A teacher who reported a colleague's inappropriate behavior with students. A nurse who questioned a doctor's suspicious prescription patterns. A neighbor who called police about sounds of violence next door. A coworker who documented financial irregularities and reported them despite company pressure to stay quiet. A teenager who told a guidance counselor about their friend's older boyfriend who was isolating and controlling her. Each recipient spoke briefly. Each said some version of the same thing. I almost didn't say anything. I was scared. But then I thought about what silence costs. I thought about Samuel's story. I thought about being able to live with myself. So I spoke up. Samuel listened with tears running down his face. I'm just an old man who overheard a phone call, he said to Evelyn. Look what you started, she replied. Look what we all continued. Evelyn spoke last. She told the story again. Not dramatically. Not for shock value. But clearly. Completely. From David's death to her vulnerability to Richard's calculated manipulation to Samuel's warning to the escape to the revelation to the trial to the foundation to this moment right now. I should have died, she said. According to Richard's plan, I should have died in a car accident in Vermont 10 years ago. He would have inherited my estate. He would have paid his debts. He would have moved on to another victim. But I'm here because someone cared enough to speak the truth even when it was terrifying to do so. She paused, looking at Samuel. Samuel gave me my life back. But more than that, he gave me purpose. Because surviving isn't enough. We have to ask, what do we do with the life we've been given? Do we hide? Do we become bitter? Do we build walls so high that nothing can hurt us but nothing can reach us either? Or do we transform our pain into protection for others? Do we take the worst thing that ever happened to us and make it mean something? She spoke about the thousands of people the foundation had helped. The education programs in schools. The resources for victims. The training for bystanders. The advocacy for better laws. None of this would exist if Samuel had stayed silent, she said. But also, none of this would exist if I had dismissed him. If Detective Morrison had refused to help. If Marcus hadn't testified. If Jennifer hadn't dedicated her career to this. If every person in this room hadn't decided that protecting vulnerable people matters more than comfort or convenience. She ended with a challenge. Everyone here tonight knows someone who's in a relationship that concerns you. Maybe it's controlling. Maybe it's isolating. Maybe it's subtly wrong in ways you can't quite articulate. You've thought about saying something. You've worried it's not your place. You've convinced yourself it's probably fine. I'm here to tell you, speak up. Do it with love. Do it with resources. Do it with commitment to stand by them even if they get angry. But speak up. Because silence is how predators win. Silence is how people die. Your voice might save a life. It saved mine. After the gala, Evelyn drove Samuel home herself. He had taught her to drive years ago, insisting she should know how. What if I'm not available, he had said. You should be able to get yourself to safety. She pulled into his driveway, helped him into his wheelchair, and pushed him up the ramp to his small house. Inside, she made tea. They sat in his living room surrounded by photos. His late wife. His daughter who had died so young. His military unit. And newer photos, Evelyn and Samuel at foundation events. Jennifer's graduation. Award ceremonies. A life of meaning assembled on the walls. I'm tired, Samuel said quietly. Not complaining. Just stating fact. I know, Evelyn replied. The doctors said. Samuel waved his hand. I know what the doctors said. 6 months. Maybe less. Cancer doesn't negotiate. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She had known, but hearing him say it made it real. What do you need? She asked. How can I help? You've already helped, Samuel said. You gave my life meaning after I thought it was too late for meaning. You let me save someone after I failed to save my daughter. You built something beautiful from something terrible. I'm ready, Evelyn. I'm at peace. I'm not ready, she admitted. I don't know how to do this without you. You've been my compass. My reminder of what matters. My proof that good people exist. You don't need me for that anymore, Samuel said gently. You have a team. You have Jennifer. You have thousands of people who believe in this work. I was just the beginning. You're the continuation. And it will continue long after both of us are gone. They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, watching the sun set through his window. Tell me something, Samuel finally said. Anything you want to know. Do you ever wish none of it happened? Not just Richard and the danger, but all of it. David's death, the grief, the fortune, the loneliness. Do you ever wish you could have just had a simple, ordinary life? Evelyn thought carefully. Sometimes, she admitted. When I wake up at 3 in the morning and remember how David used to hold me. When I attend a wedding and remember what mine was supposed to be. When I talk to a survivor whose story is worse than mine and I feel helpless to take away their pain. Yes, sometimes I wish I could have been ordinary. Unknown. Safe. But? Samuel prompted, hearing the unspoken word. But then I think about the letters I receive. The women who left dangerous relationships because something I said resonated. The teenagers who recognized grooming behavior because of our education programs. The Samuels out there who found courage to speak up because you showed them how. And I think, this is my purpose. This is why I survived. Not just to live, but to make survival matter. Samuel smiled. That's exactly right. That's exactly the answer I hoped you'd give. Over the next months, Samuel's health declined. Evelyn visited daily. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat together. She brought him updates about the foundation. Photos from events. Letters from people whose lives had been changed. You're not just saving me anymore, she told him one afternoon. You've saved thousands. Maybe tens of thousands if we count everyone who's been helped directly and indirectly. That's your legacy. Our legacy, Samuel corrected. This was always a partnership. I spoke up. You listened. Together we built something. That's how it works. No one changes the world alone. Jennifer visited often too. Samuel had become like a grandfather to her. Tell me what you've learned, he would say. Teach me about the modern world. Help this old man understand. And Jennifer would explain social media dynamics. Digital manipulation. Online grooming. Catfishing. All the new ways predators operated. Samuel listened intently. Same patterns, he would say. New platforms. But the pattern is always the same: identify vulnerability, exploit it, isolate the victim, maintain control. Once you understand the pattern, you can recognize it anywhere. He made videos. When he felt strong enough. Short messages about awareness, courage, intervention. Don't wait for perfect certainty, he said in one. I wasn't perfectly certain. I overheard half a conversation. I could have been wrong. But I asked myself, what's the cost of being wrong versus the cost of being right and staying silent? The answer was clear. Being wrong meant embarrassment and maybe losing my job. Being right and staying silent meant Evelyn would die. Easy choice. These videos became foundation resources. Played at trainings. Shared on social media. Downloaded millions of times. Samuel's weathered face, his quiet voice, his absolute conviction that ordinary people have extraordinary power to protect each other. On a cold November afternoon, Samuel died peacefully in his sleep. Evelyn was there, holding his hand. He had been unconscious for 2 days. But that afternoon, he opened his eyes one last time. Did we do good? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We did so good," Evelyn assured him, tears streaming. "So many people are alive because of you. So many people are safe. You did more than good. You did what most people only dream of doing. You changed the world." Samuel smiled. "Thank you for listening," he whispered. "Thank you for speaking," Evelyn replied. He closed his eyes. Minutes later, he was gone. The funeral was enormous. The foundation staff. Every award recipient. Survivors who credited Samuel with their safety. Law enforcement who had worked with him. Media who had told his story. The church overflowed. People stood outside listening to the service through speakers. Evelyn gave the eulogy. She spoke about the quiet man who saw danger when everyone else saw romance. The faithful driver who became a hero. The father who failed to save his daughter but saved countless others. The ordinary man who did extraordinary things simply by refusing to stay silent. "Samuel used to say he was just a driver," Evelyn said. "But he was never just anything. He was a witness. A protector. A truth teller. He was proof that your position doesn't determine your power. That courage doesn't require authority. That one person speaking up can change everything. We will miss him. But we will continue his work. We will speak up. We will listen. We will intervene. We will protect. Because that's what Samuel taught us. And that's how we honor his memory." After Samuel's death, Evelyn threw herself deeper into the foundation's work. Grief has to go somewhere. She channeled hers into expansion. They opened offices in 5 new countries. They developed programs in multiple languages. They partnered with international organizations. They trained law enforcement worldwide. The foundation established the Samuel Center for Bystander Intervention. It focused specifically on teaching people how to recognize danger and respond effectively. Not just in romantic relationships but in all areas: workplace harassment, elder abuse, child exploitation, trafficking, financial scams, cult recruitment. Samuel's lesson applies everywhere, Jennifer explained at the center's opening. Wherever vulnerable people exist, predators exist. And wherever predators exist, bystanders exist. People who see something wrong. Our job is to transform bystanders into interveners. To give them tools, courage, and support to act. The center developed a simple framework: see, say, stay. See the warning signs. Say something to the person at risk. Stay involved until they're safe. Too many people stop at say, Jennifer taught. They warn someone once, get dismissed or argued with, and give up. Samuel didn't give up. He not only warned Aunt Evelyn, he had a plan to protect her. He stayed involved through the entire process. That's what intervention means. It's not a one-time warning. It's a commitment. The curriculum expanded to include how to help without being controlling yourself. How to support without deciding for someone. How to recognize when your concern is legitimate versus when it's projection or jealousy. Not everyone who expresses concern is a Samuel, the training emphasized. Sometimes people disguise their own desire for control as concern. Real intervention respects autonomy while providing information and resources. It says, I see something that worries me, here's why, here are resources, I'm here if you need me. It doesn't say, you must leave this person or I won't support you anymore. That's just trading one controller for another. The foundation also addressed the complicated reality that sometimes victims return to their abusers multiple times before leaving permanently. On average, it takes 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship, the training materials stated. Don't give up on someone because they didn't leave the first time you warned them. Samuel warned Evelyn once and she listened. But many people need multiple warnings, multiple resources, multiple attempts. Your job is to remain a consistent, non-judgmental source of support. Evelyn spoke at universities, conferences, government hearings. She testified about the need for better legal protections. For financial systems that flag suspicious account changes. For marriage laws that include cooling-off periods for vulnerable populations. For better training for lawyers, doctors, therapists, and financial advisors in recognizing exploitation. Some of her proposals became law. Others faced resistance. But the conversation was happening. The awareness was growing. The culture was shifting. Media coverage of relationship violence began changing. Less focus on, why did she stay? More focus on, why did he abuse? Less victim blaming. More accountability for perpetrators. Evelyn's story was part of that shift. She had been educated, wealthy, accomplished, and still nearly murdered. It shattered the myth that only certain types of people become victims. Predators don't target weakness, she would say. They target opportunity. They target loneliness. They target grief. They target hope. They target anyone with something they want. Intelligence and success are not armor. Awareness and support systems are armor. As Evelyn aged, she gradually stepped back from daily foundation operations. Jennifer took over as executive director. The board expanded to include survivors, advocates, law enforcement, researchers. The work continued and grew. Evelyn had accomplished what she set out to do, built something that would outlive her. She spent more time at her Vermont farmhouse. She wrote. She painted. She gardened. She lived quietly, which felt revolutionary after years of public speaking and media attention. She maintained friendships with the people who had mattered most. Detective Morrison, retired now, lived nearby. They had coffee weekly. Marcus, who had served his time and spent years working for the foundation, visited occasionally. The relationship was complicated but real. He had been willing to murder her. He had also helped convict the man who hired him and dedicated years to preventing others from following his path. People contained multitudes. Old friends from before David's death reconnected. Some relationships had been damaged by Richard's manipulation. He had slowly isolated her from people who might have questioned him. But true friends forgave. They understood. And the friendships that survived were deeper for having been tested. On her 70th birthday, Evelyn did something unexpected. She got a tattoo. Small and discreet on her wrist. Just 2 words, he spoke. Samuel spoke up, she explained to Jennifer. And everything changed. I want to carry that reminder with me. That voices matter. That speaking up matters. That one person's courage can ripple across thousands of lives. She also started a podcast called Conversations with Evelyn. Nothing fancy. Just her talking to survivors, advocates, reformed perpetrators, researchers, bystanders who had intervened. Long-form conversations. Deep discussions. No editing to make things neat. Just real, complicated, honest exploration of how abuse happens and how we stop it. The podcast became unexpectedly popular. Millions of downloads. People appreciated the depth. The nuance. The refusal to reduce complex situations to simple slogans. One episode featured her interviewing a woman whose mother had tried to warn her about her fiancé. The woman hadn't listened. Had married him anyway. Had endured 5 years of escalating abuse before finally leaving. I owe my mother an apology, the woman said in the interview. She saw what I couldn't see. She tried to warn me. I called her jealous and controlling. I cut her off for 2 years. By the time I finally left, by the time I finally admitted she was right, I had wasted years of my life and damaged our relationship. I wish I had been like you. I wish I had listened the first time someone warned me. Why didn't you? Evelyn asked gently. Why did you dismiss her concern? Because I wanted so badly to be loved, the woman said. Because he made me feel special. Because I thought my mother didn't understand. Because leaving would mean admitting I had made a terrible mistake and I wasn't ready to admit that. Because he had convinced me that everyone who criticized him was against us, and I believed him. Because abuse doesn't announce itself. It creeps in gradually, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already trapped. What would you say to people who are being warned by someone who loves them? Evelyn asked. Listen, the woman said simply. Even if you don't believe it. Even if you get angry. Even if you think they're wrong. Just listen. Take the information seriously. Ask yourself, does this person have any reason to lie to me? Do they benefit from breaking up my relationship? Or do they just love me and want me safe? And if it's the latter, at least consider that they might see something you can't see from the inside. These conversations helped people. Both those being warned and those doing the warning. They provided language. Frameworks. Permission to have hard conversations. In her mid-70s, Evelyn's health began declining. Nothing dramatic. Just the slow accumulation of age. She arranged her affairs carefully. The foundation was fully funded in perpetuity. Her estate would continue supporting the work. Jennifer and the board were prepared for leadership transition. Evelyn was ready. She had lived a full life. Had loved deeply. Had survived grief and danger. Had transformed pain into purpose. Had helped thousands. Had mattered. On a spring afternoon, sitting on her porch overlooking the Vermont mountains, Evelyn recorded her final video message. It would be released after her death. She spoke directly to the camera, her voice still strong despite her aging body. If you're watching this, I'm gone, she began. And I'm at peace with that. I've lived long enough to see the work continue without me. That's all any of us can hope for, to build something that matters and outlasts us. I want to say thank you. To Samuel, who saved my life and gave me purpose. To Jennifer and everyone at the foundation who turned a personal story into a global movement. To Detective Morrison and Marcus and everyone who helped bring Richard to justice. To every survivor who trusted me with their story. To every bystander who found the courage to speak up after hearing mine. To everyone who chose protection over comfort. You've all taught me that humanity is defined not by the evil that exists, but by how we respond to it. Evil people will always exist. Predators will always hunt. But good people outnumber them. And when good people act, when they refuse to stay silent, when they intervene with courage and compassion, they create a world where predators cannot thrive. I also want to speak directly to anyone who is currently in a relationship that worries them. Anyone who feels controlled or isolated or diminished. Anyone whose friends and family have expressed concern. Please listen. Please consider that the people who love you might see something you can't see from the inside. Please know that leaving is possible. Please know that resources exist. Please know that you deserve safety and respect and autonomy. And please know that I believe you. Whatever you're experiencing, I believe you. And to the Samuels out there, the bystanders who see something wrong but don't know if they should speak up, speak up. Do it with love. Do it with resources. Do it with commitment. And do it knowing that you might be wrong. You might embarrass yourself. You might lose a relationship. But if you're right, you might save a life. Samuel risked his career, his reputation, his relationship with me to warn me. And because of that, thousands of people are alive today who wouldn't be otherwise. That's not an exaggeration. That's math. One person spoke. One person listened. And the ripple effects continue. Finally, I want to say something about Richard. The man who planned to murder me. I've been asked countless times if I forgive him. The honest answer is, I don't think about him enough to forgive or not forgive. He's a person who tried to kill me for money. He failed. He's in prison. That chapter is closed. But I do think about what he represents. He represents the fact that evil often looks attractive. That danger often feels safe. That predators study their prey and become exactly what we need them to be. That's terrifying. But it's also empowering. Because once you understand the pattern, you can recognize it. Once you know the warning signs, you can't unsee them. Once you learn to trust the people who truly love you, you can distinguish their concern from a predator's manipulation. Richard taught me what evil looks like. Samuel taught me what good looks like. And the difference between them is this: Richard saw my vulnerability as opportunity. Samuel saw my vulnerability as something to protect. One wanted to exploit my grief. One wanted to guard it. One became what I needed to trust him. One was simply trustworthy. Learn that difference. Teach that difference. Live that difference. That's my final message. That's my legacy. Not that I survived, but that I used survival to build protection for others. Not that I was nearly murdered, but that I transformed that near death into a movement for life. Not that evil exists, but that good people can defeat it when they choose courage over comfort. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this work. Thank you for speaking up, for listening, for intervening, for protecting. The foundation will continue. The work will continue. The lives will continue to be saved. And somewhere, Samuel is smiling. Because he spoke up. And everything changed. 20 years after that wedding day, the world was different. Not perfect. Predators still existed. Abuse still happened. People still died at the hands of those who claimed to love them. But the conversation had changed. The awareness had grown. The resources had multiplied. The Evelyn Carter Foundation operated in 43 countries. They had helped over 500,000 people directly. Millions more indirectly through education programs, advocacy, research, and cultural change. The Samuel Award for Moral Courage had recognized hundreds of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. A teacher in Japan who reported a colleague's exploitation of students. A neighbor in Brazil who intervened in domestic violence. A coworker in South Africa who documented financial fraud. A teenager in Canada who told authorities about online grooming. A nurse in India who questioned a suspicious pattern of patient deaths. Each one had been scared. Each one had risked something. Each one had spoken up anyway. Jennifer, now in her 40s, led the foundation with the same passion Evelyn had. She had married a social worker she met at a conference. They had 2 children who grew up attending foundation events, understanding from an early age that protecting vulnerable people was important work. Your great-aunt Evelyn almost died, Jennifer told her children when they were old enough to understand. But a good man warned her. And because of that, because she listened and because he spoke, all of this exists. Our family's entire life is different because one person had courage and another person had wisdom. Remember that. You have that same power. Your voice matters. Your awareness matters. Your willingness to speak up matters. The children understood. They volunteered at foundation events. They shared resources with their friends. They asked questions when something seemed wrong. They were the next generation of interveners. Marcus, now in his 70s, still worked part-time for the foundation. He had never married, never had children, dedicated his post-prison life entirely to redemption. I can't undo what I was willing to do, he said in an interview on the Foundation's 20th anniversary. I was willing to murder a woman I'd never met for money. That's who I was. But I've spent 20 years trying to be someone different. Someone who prevents what I was hired to do. Does that balance the scales? I don't know. Probably not. But it's all I can offer. Evelyn had passed away peacefully 5 years earlier at age 75. Her funeral had been enormous. Thousands attended. Thousands more watched online. The outpouring of gratitude from people whose lives she had touched, directly or indirectly, had been overwhelming. Her final video message had been played. People wept. People committed to continuing the work. People shared their own stories of speaking up or being saved by someone who spoke up. The ripple effects continued. Detective Morrison had died 2 years after Evelyn. She had retired from police work but never retired from advocacy. She had trained countless officers in recognizing and investigating financial exploitation. She had developed protocols still used by law enforcement worldwide. At her funeral, a colleague said, Linda believed that justice wasn't just about punishing criminals. It was about protecting potential victims. She saved lives by teaching others how to see danger. That's a detective's highest calling. The farmhouse where Evelyn had hidden had been purchased by the foundation and turned into a retreat center for survivors. People came there to heal. To process trauma. To plan their next steps. To rest in safety. A plaque outside read, "In this place, Evelyn Carter hid from danger and planned her survival. May all who come here find the same courage and the same hope. May all who leave here know they are not alone." The estate where the wedding was supposed to happen had been converted into a training center. The very grounds where Evelyn would have married her murderer now hosted programs teaching people how to recognize and escape exploitation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Evil's intended stage had become good's classroom. Richard remained in prison. Now in his late 70s, he had refused parole hearings, saying he didn't deserve release. He continued doing recorded interviews for the foundation, providing the predator's perspective. His contributions were valuable but complicated. Some survivors found them helpful. Others found them triggering. The foundation always provided content warnings and context. Richard's perspective helps us understand how predators think, Jennifer would explain. But we never center him. We never celebrate him. We never suggest he's redeemed. He's a cautionary tale and an educational resource. Nothing more. The Foundation's research division had published groundbreaking studies on financial exploitation in romantic relationships. On isolation tactics. On grooming patterns. On how predators select and groom victims. On effective intervention strategies. On survivor resilience. The research was cited in academic papers, legal proceedings, policy discussions worldwide. Universities offered courses on interpersonal violence prevention that used Evelyn's story as a case study. Medical schools trained doctors to recognize signs of control and exploitation. Law schools taught lawyers to look for suspicious patterns in estate planning and prenuptial agreements. Business schools discussed ethical responsibilities when you observe concerning behavior. Everyone has a role in prevention, the curriculum emphasized. Doctors, lawyers, financial advisors, therapists, teachers, neighbors, friends, family, co-workers. We all see pieces of people's lives. When we share those observations with each other, patterns emerge. No one person has to have perfect certainty. But collective awareness creates safety. 20 years later, the media continued referencing Evelyn's story. Every time a similar case emerged, someone nearly killed by a romantic partner for financial gain, journalists mentioned her. Like Evelyn Carter, became shorthand for financial predators in romantic relationships. Her story had entered cultural consciousness. But more importantly, it had changed behavior. Surveys showed increased willingness to speak up about concerning relationships. Increased awareness of financial exploitation. Increased skepticism of romantic partners who rushed commitment or tried to control finances. Increased appreciation for the people in service positions who observe our lives. The driver. The housekeeper. The assistant. The waiter who sees how your date treats you. The hairstylist who notices bruises. The nurse who asks gentle questions. These aren't invisible people. They're witnesses. And sometimes, they're the only ones who see the truth. On the 20th anniversary of that wedding day, the foundation held a global event. Simultaneous gatherings in dozens of countries. Survivors shared stories. Interveners shared stories. Families of those who didn't survive shared stories. A moment of silence for those lost to intimate partner violence. A moment of celebration for those saved. A moment of commitment to continue the work. Jennifer spoke at the main event, held at the training center on the grounds where her aunt was supposed to marry. 20 years ago, my Aunt Evelyn was supposed to get married right here, she began. She was supposed to walk down an aisle over there. Exchange vows under that tree. Celebrate with 200 guests. Begin a new life. Instead, her driver whispered a warning. She made an impossible choice. She trusted someone she had barely seen as human over someone she planned to marry. And that choice, that moment, that whisper, changed everything. Not just for her. For all of us. Because she didn't just survive. She built this. All of this. Every person helped. Every life saved. Every policy changed. Every conversation started. All of it began with one man seeing danger and refusing to stay silent. And one woman having the courage to listen. So today, on this anniversary, we honor both of them. Samuel, who spoke. Evelyn, who listened. And we commit to being like them. To speaking when we see danger. To listening when people who love us express concern. To intervening with courage and compassion. To building a world where predators cannot thrive because good people refuse to stay silent. Samuel used to say he was just a driver. But he was never just anything. He was a hero. An ordinary person who did an extraordinary thing simply by caring enough to act. And that's what we all can be. We don't need special powers. We don't need positions of authority. We just need to care. To observe. To speak. To listen. To act. That's how we honor Samuel. That's how we honor Evelyn. That's how we save the next person who's in danger right now and doesn't know it yet. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this work. Thank you for choosing courage over comfort. And to anyone watching who needs help, we see you. We believe you. We're here. You don't have to hide in the boot of a car. You don't have to disappear to survive. We will help you. We will protect you. We will stand with you. That's our promise. That's Samuel's legacy. That's Evelyn's gift to the world. Speak up. Listen. Act. Lives depend on it. The story of Evelyn Carter and Samuel doesn't end because stories like this never really end. Somewhere right now, someone is planning to exploit someone vulnerable. Somewhere right now, someone is noticing warning signs in a friend's relationship. Somewhere right now, someone is deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. Somewhere right now, someone is choosing whether to listen to concern or dismiss it. These moments happen millions of times a day around the world. And each one is an opportunity. An opportunity for courage. For wisdom. For intervention. For protection. Evelyn and Samuel's story is extraordinary in its outcome but ordinary in its components. An ordinary man saw something wrong and said something. An ordinary woman trusted her instincts despite her desires. Together, they created something that saved thousands. But they started as just two people making hard choices. That's the power of their story. It's not about superheroes. It's not about people with special resources or unique abilities. It's about ordinary humans deciding that protecting life matters more than personal comfort. It's about choosing courage when fear would be easier. It's about speaking when silence would be safer. The foundation continues its work. The training centers operate. The hotlines answer calls. The shelters provide safety. The lawyers offer representation. The therapists provide support. The advocates push for better laws. The researchers study patterns. The educators teach awareness. All of it exists because one driver whispered, "Hide in the boot." All of it continues because that whisper was heard. So this is not the end of the story. It's an invitation to be part of it. To be a Samuel in someone's life. To be an Evelyn who listens. To be a Jennifer who continues the work. To be a Detective Morrison who helps. To be a Marcus who chooses redemption. To be part of the solution instead of part of the silence. The question isn't whether you'll encounter someone in danger. Statistics say you will. The average person knows multiple people who are or will be in exploitative or abusive relationships. The question is, will you speak up? Will you intervene? Will you stay involved until they're safe? Will you be the reason someone survives? That's the legacy of Evelyn Carter. That's the lesson of Samuel's courage. That's the invitation to all of us. One voice can change everything. One warning can save a life. One person refusing to stay silent can start a movement that saves thousands. Will you be that person? Will you throw the stone that creates the ripple? Will you speak up when you see something wrong? The answer to that question determines whether this story continues in your life. And in the life of someone who needs a Samuel. Someone who's in danger and doesn't know it yet. Someone who needs to hear, if you value your life, something is very wrong here. Let me help you. Be that voice. Be that courage. Be that protection. That's how we honor Evelyn. That's how we honor Samuel. That's how we save the next life. And the next. And the next. The work continues. The stories continue. The lives continue. Because people like you choose to speak up. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Evelyn's position? Would you have trusted your driver over the man you planned to marry? Would you have had the courage to hide in that boot and disappear on your wedding day? Have you ever ignored a warning that you later wished you'd listened to? Or have you ever warned someone and they didn't listen? How did that feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about this. Let's learn from each other. Because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Your experience might give someone else courage. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it changed how you see relationships or warnings or the people who serve you, then subscribe. Join this community. Be part of the conversation. Because we need more Samuels in this world. We need more people willing to speak up. We need more people willing to listen. And maybe, just maybe, together we can create a world where stories like Evelyn's end in survival more often than tragedy. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to get to the end of this story. Stay safe. Stay aware. And always, always listen to the people who truly see you.